Hello, I'm Bruce DuPoit. Coming up.
The uptick in crime. It has residents on edge and police searching for answers.
Put more ultra value on the deep. Flood the streets with them.
Some blame the use of synthetic drugs.
All the problems with people getting punched and random attacks is dangerous.
Others say the problems go deeper. Today on News Talk, a one-on-one with Police Chief Kathy Lanier. Your calls included.
From News Channel 8, this is News Talk with Bruce DuPoit.
Hi, everybody. Welcome in on this Tuesday. You picked a great day to join us. We have a great lineup. As always, we're grateful that you're spending part of your day with us. And it's a pleasure to be able to welcome back to the show D.C. Police Chief Kathy Lanier. We're privileged to have the Chief with us on a regular basis. We say hello, Chief. Welcome. And,
thanks for having me,
Bruce. Good to see you.
Seems like it's been a long time since I've been here.
It's been a while. We open our doors anytime. Thanks very much for coming in. You know the numbers like you know the back of your hand. You see these numbers every day. You see them all the time. They probably keep you up at night. Let me share them with the folks watching today. There have been 94 homicides in the district so far this year, and we're, of course, about 7.5 months into the year. That's a 30% jump from 2014, when the city suffered 105 killings during the entire 12 months of that period. What is responsible, in your view, as you think about it and talk with your top commanders, et cetera, folks in the neighborhoods, what's responsible for the uptick in crime we're seeing in D.C. and around the country?
I can tell you just in Washington, D.C. and consistently across all the major cities that we met with, we actually, through Major City Chiefs, surveyed all the major cities about upticks. 2 out of 3 major cities are showing upticks in homicides, 60% showing upticks in non-fatal shootings, and significant increases in the non-fatal shootings also. All of us are seeing kind of the same thing. You look at the numbers that you just put up there, that, you know, the 31% increase in homicides today from where we were at this time last year, but we've got a 34% increase in the number of arrests for murder. So we've got, you know, we've made 53 arrests for murder compared to, you know, 37, 38 this time last year. So we're arresting more people for the crime of homicide, and the people we're arresting, and this is what is consistent in every city, have 15, 20 prior arrests. Many of them we have 10 people involved in homicides this year that had prior homicide charges. We've never seen that before. So something's going on with the number of repeat violent offenders that are on the street. Just the sheer volume. I know there's been a shift to more community placement, you know, to under sequestration, and shift away from mass incarceration. But that doesn't explain, the shift away from mass incarceration should have focused only on property, minor, low-level offenders, not violent offenders. But we're seeing huge numbers of repeat violent gun offenders that are out in the community, some under supervision, some not, some early release. But the numbers are really just staggering right now.
So part of this is a courts issue, in your view?
Well, I think it's an issue a little broader than that even. I mean, there has been a push over the past several years to release a lot of people. Cut sentences short. We had a person involved in a homicide this year that had a 15-year sentence, served 7 years, and is back out on the street. So when you see that person involved in a second homicide, that's a concern. We had a shootout the other day, and one of the persons involved that we arrested in the shootout had 2 prior homicide charges. So, Mayor Bowser has asked the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which is a body that's appointed here just in the district, to kind of look at criminal justice, the system as a whole, because we're so unique to every other country, every other jurisdiction in the country, because our prosecutors are federal. Most of the probation, supervision agencies are federal. So the mayor has asked them to look at the whole system from arrest to sentencing, and do a little bit of a historical look to see what's happening that's causing this huge influx of repeat violent offenders that are out on the street committing these types of crimes that you're seeing now.
The city has come so far from the days when we had hundreds of murders a year, when we were nationally known for homicides, and when the city just didn't feel safe. As I say, a long, long way. But I don't think for most people the city feels as safe now as it did 2 or 3 years ago. Do you accept that? Do you hear that from people?
Well, I tell you, the repeated focus in the media every single day, Chicago experiences the same thing. Every single day the headlines are, what happened in crime. And we're very open. We put every crime and every incident on our listservs. We put it out to the news media. A lot of agencies don't do that. We want people to know what's going on. But the reality is the focus on the uptick in homicides has people feeling like everything is kind of out of control here. In fact, we're 11% lower today in violent crime than we were in 2012 when we only had 88 murders. So 88 murders in 2012 was the low mark for us. That was the lowest we've driven homicides down in 60 years. But today, there's 11% less violent crime. So the one crime that's driving this right now, the fear in our community, is the homicides. And 90% of those homicides are disputes between people who know each other. 95% disputes between people who know each other who resort to violence with a gun.
And that has to be, let's use that as a jumping off point for a moment. When there is somebody getting jostled with a bag on a bus, a purse or whatever, and it's not, oh, excuse me, or some small scale scuffle or what have you, but when it ratchets up, when there's a game, a dice game or whatever that might be happening in a neighborhood where a dispute leads to violence, what thoughts do you have?
Well, I think that it's difficult to explain that there are circumstances. What's behind the homicide numbers this year is the circumstances you just described. We just had a homicide the other day. A person bumped into another person on the bus, and then a person was stabbed to death. So 2 strangers, somebody bumps into somebody, a fight ensues, and then a person is stabbed to death.
It's crazy.
A group of people who've known each other for years and years and years are playing a game of craps, a dice game, and either someone is upset about losing money or somebody comes in to take other people's money, and multiple people being shot. That scenario has played out about 8 times this year in homicide cases. So it seems that dispute resolution lately amongst people who know each other is homicide. And it's really difficult to explain how that's acceptable in most of our culture. But in some areas and some people, that is the culture, and we have to break that cycle.
What is MPD doing right now? What's your strategy as you tackle all of this?
So I think the numbers of arrests that we've been able to make is showing that the community is still, willing to come forward. They're not so to a point where they've reached, apathy. We don't see what we see in other cities. People are coming forward. They're giving us information. We are flooded with tips every time we put out information on a case, and we are closing those cases. But really trying to keep the visibility up, trying to go after those dice games, trying to go after the guns. The influx of high-capacity magazines and guns that we're seeing, like every other city, for whatever reason, the influx is so significant now. Over the weekend, we recovered 10 guns. 102 guns we've recovered in 30 days. I think we did 6 guns last night.
Is there an arrest in every one of those cases?
Almost all of them. So some of them are search warrant following arrest. Some of them are arrest on the street in possession. We arrested a person over the weekend who had an Uzi. This person had 22 prior arrests, had the Uzi in a home accessible to children, a loaded Uzi. So, these are the kinds of things that we're seeing over and over and over again. And the violence is very largely being carried out by people who have multiple prior violent crime arrests.
Are prosecutors not able to get these cases from your people to a successful prosecution, a sentence, folks who are dangerous and a threat to the community being put away? Are judges not not issuing what you would regard to be the appropriate sentence given the acts that have been committed? Are they coming out too quickly? I want to get as specific as we can on that.
Well, that's what we've asked the CJCC to look at. The only part of the justice system that produces numbers is us. Right? We produce arrests, we produce numbers. There's not a statistic you can ask for that we don't have. But you don't get that from prosecutors, you don't get that from the courts, you don't get that from sentencing, you don't get it from parole. Right? So what we want to look at is, there's a lot of things that can happen in a case. So we can make an arrest for an armed robbery, and prosecutors may not be able to make that armed robbery case for one reason or another. Maybe a gun was discarded and it's difficult connecting the person with the gun, so they may push forward as an unarmed robbery instead of an armed robbery, right? So they try and make the case that they can. They may be overwhelmed with the volume of cases and may offer a plea agreement, which means they'll offer a plea agreement to a lesser charge, and then that way the prosecutors can focus on other cases instead of preparing for court. But then a lot of times what we're seeing is a crime of violence being pled down to a nonviolent crime, which means the penalty is going to be significantly different. Because now the judge has to make a decision based on sentencing guidelines. So what the mayor has asked TJCC to do, and what the chiefs nationwide has asked, the whole entire government to do, is look at sentencing guidelines, analyze where the problems are. Something's happening that's flooding our streets with repeat violent offenders and these very deadly incidents where you have multiple people shot, and somebody has to do something about that.
Do you have a feel for when that analysis will come back or be ready to be read?
So there was a city that attended our summit that had a similar study done that will be released soon. I know it took them 2 years because literally the only part of the justice system that produces statistics is the police department. So they had to follow, I believe in the jurisdiction that did the study, they followed 481 very violent offense cases all the way through the process. And I tell you, at the end of the review, they found that only 6% of those 481 violent offense arrests resulted in jail time. So there's problems throughout that they identified. So that's kind of what we're hoping for, but I don't think it's going to be something that's done next week.
Can you tell us briefly, Chief, before we hit our first break, about the shooting at 7th and S in a neighborhood that has had some violence? And I mean, this young man who died, as with so many people who are victims of violent crime, so much promise, so happy to be in Washington, just in some ways getting life started. Can you tell us about that case?
So there's a lot about this case, and we have a lot of video I'd like to get out on the air today to talk about. But essentially, we know we had two people who were standing on the corner of 7th and S, on opposite corners, that opened fire on we believe, a red Chrysler 300. We don't know if that car returned fire or not, but that's where our victim was hit when those folks were shooting. The video you're looking at now is of people that we believe were in that red car, that 300, because that red car then went a little farther down the road, fired shots at someone else, pointed a gun at someone else, and left. And we know that car...
this is about 5 in the evening?
Yes. We know that car was taken in a burglary in Bowie, Maryland. So the red or burgundy Chrysler 300 was stolen August the 11th. It was used in this video here that these individuals involved used that car to commit a burglary in the district on Argyle Terrace on the 12th. And then on the 15th, this is the actual suspects involved in the shooting here that you're showing now, that we believe they're out there on the corner of 7th and S shooting. And that shooting is the one that resulted in the death of 23-year-old Mr. Shlonsky.
Very sad case.
Very sad case.
Chief, stand by for just a moment. We'll take a quick break here. When we come back, more of our conversation with D.C. Police Chief Kathy Lanier. We'll go to the phones as well. So if you have a question or comment for the Chief, stay with us. Keep watching. We will be speaking to you in the segments that follow. A break here. Back with more News Talk right after this.